Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to 2023 Small Business Week, live here from the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce. We're so excited today to be launching our Foundable Speaker Series here for the San Francisco Disability Business Alliance. We have a lot of great panelists here today who I'll introduce momentarily. My name is Peter de Haas. I'm the founder and executive director of the San Francisco Disability Business Alliance. We're 3 years old this year, and we're so happy and excited to be a part of the economic recovery of San Francisco and celebrating small business and being here today to celebrate disability inclusion as it relates to small business. The SFDBA was founded on the premise that we really wanted to put a disability-owned business on the map and make sure that people understand that small business owners with disabilities have a voice in the business community as well, but also increasing awareness and access to resources. So SFDBA to date has helped over 200 different small business owners, and we're excited about some of our new partnerships with the ARC of San Francisco in particular. Our Future Entrepreneur Program received some funding recently, and we're going to be launching 3 cohorts over the next year to support young adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities at the ARC. And yeah, we're making progress here, and we're so excited to have everyone here participating today. I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have Rome Jones and Bali Nelson, and we have Chelsea House participating virtually, and we have our amazing interpreter, ASL interpreter, Beth Wagmeister. So if anybody needs ASL interpretation today, you can pin Beth. We also have the captioning option turned on, so if you want to click on captions, you have access to captions as well. And we'll do a little bit of Q&A later, but first we're just going to start with 2 questions in a poll just to get a sense of why you're joining us today. So please participate in a quick poll here. Give everybody a minute or 2 to participate. And then we'll try to, seems like some folks are responding. Give everybody another minute. Should we be using the mic directly, or is it just picking up? It's good. Okay. All right, let's see what our poll results say here. We just had 2 questions, so which applies to you? So we have 10% who currently own a small business, 80% interested in learning more about how to start a small business, and 10% in the process of starting a small business. What are you hoping to learn from this panel? 10%, some of the benefits of starting a small business, 10%, some of the challenges of starting a small business, and 80%, some of the resources available to help start a small business. So great, we can review some of those resources at the end. But without further ado, we're going to kick off here. And I think we'll start with Chelsea today, just to do a brief intro and pitch and mission statement, if you would. Chelsea, you're muted.
Step number 1, unmute your mic. Hey y'all, my name is Chelsea House. I'm the founder of Ability Design LLC, and my business is an access-centered consulting and creative services agency with a mission to elevate ease, joy, and advancement for people with disabilities. And for me, specifically in this season of my entrepreneurship journey, I've decided to focus specifically on the Black disabled femme. As a Black disabled femme myself, and as a big part of my work is broadening who it is we think about when we discuss disability justice and disability identity.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Rome, do you want to go next?
Sure. Do I need that?
No, you just use your outdoor voice.
Got it. So I'm Rome Jones. I'm the founder of Pinpoint Building Group, which at this point is a real estate brokerage, consulting, and like community space. It's a company, but it's space because I do a lot of mentoring, just like outreach stuff as well. I can't quote my mission statement like exactly. I think it's centered around serving underserved communities of color, especially in real estate journeys, whatever that may consist of. If it's planning for real estate or purchasing or selling or anything of that nature, like building wealth and through the real estate process in whichever way, or even exposure to careers in real estate, which like I'm really trying to get into for like my younger crowd following, so to speak.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Bali.
Yeah, I founded Nelson ESL Consulting in 2020. And what I do is I provide online ESL coaching to non-native speakers of English who need to improve their English skills for their personal and professional goals. And most of them are very advanced level speakers, so they've already gone through like regular ESL programs. And I have some clients who are either disabled or they have adult children with disabilities. So my client base overlaps with the disability community. And I also do pro bono work with various organizations that are supporting people with disabilities or older workers or people whose economic circumstances are making it hard for them to get healthcare, education, legal assistance, other kinds of basic services.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And since you touched on the topic of serving people with disabilities, I'm going to serve up the first question to you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
How has your disability influenced your business in any way? For example, either starting a business or a type of business that you started, your disability influence on your decision to start a business yourself.
Okay, so I have multiple disabilities. Some of them are congenital and some of them are acquired. And one of my congenital disabilities is visual, and I've never been able to drive, which is a huge problem in America because our public transit is not great. So that has always restricted like where I can live, where I can work, what kind of jobs I can take. And I basically had a major deterioration in my health about 5 years ago. And I had been an in-person teacher to adult international students and diplomats and immigrants. And it was just clear that I was not going to be able to keep doing that. And so I was looking for something that I could do where I could still use my skills, but I didn't have to drive. I had a completely flexible schedule. I could choose, what hours I could work, or if I needed to have surgeries or medical appointments or things like that. So one of the good things about my business is minimal startup costs. Like all you need is like a laptop, a Zoom, and a reasonable internet connection. And I didn't have to get loans or convince a venture capitalist to, that kind of thing. And it works very well with my particular kinds of disabilities because I don't have to drive. I have a completely flexible schedule. If I'm not well or my client is not well, because I also have clients with disabilities, we don't have to do a video call. Like if we're both in our pajamas and we're going back to bed after this class, we can turn off our camera, And it's helpful to me to have control over my environment in terms of noise, distractions, stress levels in terms of the people I'm interacting with. And I have other health issues that make it difficult for me to stand or sit for long periods of time, so I can move around, as I need to. So those are just there's a lot of advantages for this, and I think it's good not only for people with disabilities, but for seniors, for example, who had a career in something and they know how to teach this skill to somebody who needs to learn that. And maybe they don't want to go back into the regular workforce, but they need some extra money because, inflation and, your pension's not as high as it was. So I think that this is a good option for a lot of people.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Chelsea, do you want to answer that question next? How has disability influenced your business in any way?
I think it's kind of funny because I went to Stanford really not wanting to ever have my own startup, or be a founder, and here I am. But I thought that entrepreneurship was a lot of work and headache in exchange for like not having a guaranteed job or insurance. And I was just like very much, I don't want to venture into that. I liked security, especially part of like my growing and my disability identity now is because growing up, I grew up low income. And so my access to learning about my health needs was also pretty limited. But as I've navigated, both health spaces and corporate spaces, I have been told, like it has been shared with me, like this place is inclusive before entering that space. But then once I'm actually in it, I learned that that's not the case, and that sometimes folks are also resistant to making the changes needed to achieve true inclusion. And so my service business was born from my numerous experiences being underserved or poorly served, or either ignored completely in the service design or like creative design of things. And so that's why my business is even both consulting and creative services, because that is like the scope of environments to me. And I want to be able to create access impact across environments, whether they are physical, digital, or some blend of the two.
Love it. Thank you, Chelsea. Rome, do you want to chime in on that? How has disability influenced your business in any way? You mentioned serving BIPOC communities in particular, which I think is great, doing outreach that way. So growing up here in San Francisco, how has it influenced your business at all?
So born and raised in San Francisco, product of the public school SFUSD system. I think like the general training is to set you up for some sort of job structure, like not necessarily to be your own boss or anything of that nature. But I come from a line of entrepreneurs, so I was able to see that in my childhood. And I knew that with my disability, the opportunities and jobs available to especially young people of color, I probably wouldn't be capable of doing, being that like even retail jobs as a teenager or construction jobs as like a young man, right? My ability to do the lifting, walking, standing, or things that it would take to do those things probably weren't like in my wheelhouse as somebody with cerebral palsy. And actually, my mom met a real estate broker who had cerebral palsy.
Wow.
And when my parents realized what he had, they asked him, is this actually what you have? And he's like, yeah, and that can be uncomfortable for some people, but they're like, we're only asking because our son has that. And they told me this probably like when I was 16 or 17, and I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. And then for whatever reason, like around 18, 19, I got the bug to like learn more about it. My mom was able to reach out to that guy. He was actually starting a class like that would help me get licensed. Met with him, we started the class later that week. I ended up like taking the class, initially got my salesperson license, set goals from there to grow in the business. But I think it originally started with like just knowing that I couldn't do the jobs that I felt were available to people like me. And so having to find another lane, right, to make it work. I think like also, I didn't want to be patronized or like get some token job. I wanted to do things that I felt could really matter. And like also be able to make a living in such an expensive area to live.
Is there any intersection in your workroom where you're actually trying to serve individuals with disabilities specifically, or that just perchance?
Well, I think what ends up happening, like funny enough, I spoke at a school last week and I just ran into a kid who also had cerebral palsy. Right? It wasn't planned, but I think me being out there and being open about my own disability, like has people reach out to me and talk about theirs and talk about some of their own ambitions, right? But I do have targeted like marketing strategies that I try to run into those type of people to expose them to different types of careers, people who identify with disabilities, right? So I think that's part of it. And then there's another part where like in my work of selling properties, just having a keen eye to make sure that not only are those properties up to code and accessible to people with disabilities, but trying to target the clientele to create a niche market for disabled home buyers or homeowners who may need to be more aware of whatever services could be available to them, right?
Excellent. Chelsea, who is your audience?
Yeah, my audience is actually pretty, is two parts. One, as I mentioned earlier, like I'm focusing on the Black disabled femme right now. And so it's first a community space for Black disabled femmes to connect with one another about our experiences. But my customer, I'm not intending to sell to that person. I'm intending to inform that person and allow that person to connect with other folks like them. Who my customer are the Black and Brown wellness and creative communities that they are a part of. Because those are the spaces that I went when I wasn't finding inclusion in other places. And they did fill my cup, but weren't necessarily always accessible to me. And that those communities also were the unlock for me in feeling like more confident in exploring all parts of my identity. So I want to support those communities in being accessible and inclusive for folks like me.
Bali, thank you, Chelsea. Bali, you touched a little bit on it. You said some of your clients' parents might have disability or vice versa. Or
some of my clients have disabilities and a lot of my clients are over 40 and they have adult children with disabilities. Like I have a single mother in an Asian country where it's very hard to be a single mother and very hard to have a disability, and she has an adult child with autism. So I think whenever possible, it's great to work in a community of people that have had some similar experiences to yours. And they, like there's no problem if they need to move a class or if I need to move a class or she's got something going on with, with her son. And I also grew up, I was middle class before the age of 13. But my parents divorced and there were lots of things going on in the family. And both of my parents and my grandparents, everybody died before I finished my master's degree. So I have been completely self-supporting since I was a teenager. When I graduated from college, I didn't have my master's degree particularly, I didn't have like a home to go to. I didn't have like financial backing to help me wait for the perfect job. And then since I can't drive and I've got all these other limitations, I feel like I got stuck in many situations taking a job that had bad working conditions or low pay or was not a supportive environment. But that was what I could do. If I had had resources and good, perfect health, I probably would have chosen to become a college professor because that's what I'm interested in. But that was just completely closed to somebody like me. So I did become a teacher. I did get my master's degree and I did work in the field. But because I had student loan debt, which again is something that more privileged people don't have to deal with, I needed a stable income. So that was a priority over like, a job where if I could have commuted to different community colleges or something, I might have eventually been able to be a college professor. So I think it's an interesting topic is the way that disability intersects with poverty. And, you're more likely to become poor if you get a disability. And if you grow up in a stressful situation, there's this, do you guys know the term ACEs, adverse childhood experiences scale? If you have had certain kinds of experiences before the age of 18, even if you do everything in your own power to take good care of your health, like you exercise, you diet, you do all these things you're supposed to do, you have a vastly increased chance of getting all different kinds of disabilities, like heart problems, stroke, depression, whatever. So, and then of course, older people, the older you get, the more likely you are to have some kind of, health problems. So I'm really interested in expanding the diversion and equity and inclusion conversation to include people with disabilities, older workers, and anybody whose economic situation is making it hard for them to access medical care, higher education, legal assistance, the things that many people take for granted,
I'm sure you're a great advocate too for the people that you come in contact with, like the mother that you spoke of in a different country who experiences things that maybe her child doesn't have the same opportunities even in their home country. But it's excellent. Thank you for sharing that. We're going to talk now about different business models. The SFDBA is aspiring to be what's called a 501c3, which is a nonprofit, allows us to do fundraising. We're currently under the fiscal sponsorship of a 501c3 umbrella organization called Social Good Fund, but we are working on becoming our own 501c3 in the next few months. Just quickly wanted to go around and to give everybody in the audience today a sense of what type of business model our panel of entrepreneurs currently employs. Chelsea, do you want to start, please?
Yeah, I'm LLC.
LLC, so limited liability.
Yes.
So that's one of the most basic business models. And Chelsea?
I'm not Chelsea.
Bali?
We look so much alike, I understand. No, a sole proprietorship, which is the most basic.
Yep.
Yeah, the most basic, I think. Structure.
Ron?
I started off as an LLC and I'm now an S Corp.
Can you explain what an S Corp is exactly?
Yeah, I don't know I know that a corporation requires me to have a board of directors and go through a series of like meetings and minutes and different things of that nature. It's different fees with the state, different things. It's different from a C Corp, which I believe is more complicated than an S Corp. But it's more like a tax purposes type situation, and then there's shares as opposed to sole proprietorship or LLC.
And you're pretty close to launching, right? Or have you?
No, I've now launched. So the process that I went through from getting my broker's license, I was still an associate broker with someone else, and Pinpoint existed in an LLC form as just a consulting thing. But the Department of Real Estate requires you act as a sole proprietor and or a corporation. They don't allow you to be an LLC. So I did what's called a conversion with the state of California.
And to our audience out there, it takes a lot of grit to manage and start your own business, but there are also, I think, many advantages to running your own business. And I want to ask our panelists, what are some of the positive things about having your own business in relation to your disability? Many times individuals with disabilities need more flexibility with their schedule, or like Bali was saying, not being able to teach in person, but being able to teach from home. So that was one example she already gave us. But Chelsea, what are some positive things about having your own business?
I get to build my own systems. I am very much a systems person, and noticing the gaps in the systems and services that I experience. And I get to, I don't have to ask anyone to approve my accommodations here. And one thing that I have decided recently is to hire someone to do some of the other stuff that I find taxing. That for me is me accommodating myself in my business. And I thankfully have the income from corporate jobs to be able to support that. But that is something I wish that more disabled entrepreneurs had a pathway to access, because I'm really excited I'm actually sending my hiring emails today after interviewing some people last week. So I'm really excited for that. And I think it's going to be a really big unlock for me because one of the conditions I live with, one of my disabilities is ADHD. So having an executive assistant for someone with executive functioning challenges is going to be awesome.
Well, you bring up a great point that individuals starting a small business are frequently starting their small business as a side hustle to start. So even if you have a full-time job now, as I work part-time at San Francisco State, but I'm also aspiring to launch SFDBA in a bigger capacity. We're looking to hire somebody in the next few months. So Chelsea brings up a great point that frequently when you start a small business, you're also doing something else on the side. So it reinforces that grit and determination that entrepreneurs have and that entrepreneurial spirit. And one of the things I love personally about having my own business is just harnessing my creativity and being able to do something that I know is greatly needed. When we launched SFDBA initially, I moved to San Francisco 10 years ago, and many of the times I found that disability was systematically excluded from any conversation as it related to small business or related to the DEI equation, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that bothered me, but it also, I saw it as an opportunity because San Francisco is such an innovative place and embraces innovation and new ideas. So don't underestimate your own creativity when you're thinking of launching a small business because, Rome, could you speak to that question? What are some of the positive things about having your own business?
Sure.
Either in relation to your disability or...
I think in general, with or without a disability in the real estate space, I no longer have to split my money with other people. It's one of the positives. They take a chunk of my money that I don't feel like they are.
Autonomy.
Yeah, that's actually the word I was gonna use next. And then I think other than that, with a disability, some days I wake up and I'm having really bad back spasms, can't move. I have to move around my schedule, start things later. It's nice to not have to call someone that morning and say even though I have a job too, I generally work part-time or full-time depending on what opportunities are in front of me. And I go to school full-time right now. So there's that.
Wow.
And he has a child.
Yeah, I have another one on the way. So
Wow.
I have 2 children almost.
Wow.
But saying that to say if my back's hurting me in the morning and I don't want to call someone and say hey, I'm gonna be late, I don't necessarily have to do that because I work for myself. So if I move my schedule back an hour, just take me an hour longer today to do things as opposed to having to report to others or even having others waiting on me to finish something and feeling this major pressure to get something done, even though I'm having a physical complication that I should probably tend to first. I just think one of the major benefits is my mental health feels a lot better because of that. I'm not beating myself up in the process of reporting to someone else. I feel good about myself. I think I can accomplish things.
And you have a partner too, right?
Yeah.
And
Some days when she likes.
but I meant in your business.
Yeah. I have a partner there too. Some days when he likes me, just depends. I mean, I think I'm a generally likable guy.
I think so.
Some days they're like, they're very busy. So I say that to say, like, some days I get help with my kids. Some days I get help with the business. Other days they're like, you'll do everything. So, yeah. But I started Pinpoint with another person.
Yep.
Me and my friend thought that it was very important to bring real estate and real estate education to communities of color. He does not have a disability that I know of. So his big push was community of color. And I was like, great, I'm with that. Let's add people with disabilities. And that's how that started.
Well, you kind of answered that question. Did you want to add anything to that? Or are you okay with me asking a different question?
Yeah, the only thing I just want to kind of echo what both of them said, which is you might not be as valued in a regular workplace, either because the workplace can't distinguish between one worker and another. But for example, if it's some kind of client-centered business, they can tell the difference between a really good person and somebody who's just kind of okay. And so when you have your own business, they're seeking you out because they know that you're good. And it's very validating, especially if you've been like underpaid or exploited or not seen or not valued like in other workplaces. Because like these are people that have money and they're choosing to spend their money on my services because they think that they're getting something valuable. So, yeah.
Excellent. Now we're going to flip the coin and ask the question, what are some of the barriers or obstacles that you have faced because of ableism as you've navigated your journey as an entrepreneur with a disability? I can remember when I was getting ready to launch SFDBA, and many of the questions that came up were, does this mean we're going to have to do curb cuts? And of course, the answer was, yes, it does. But what does that, it does have something to do with SFDBA, but it was so far afield and reinforced the fear that comes up when people hear the term disability. They immediately think, oh my gosh, I'm going to get sued, or I'm going to have to spend money, or they don't know what to say. So that was part of my intention in launching SFDBA as well, was educating people that there's no fear in disability. It's about education. Yeah, you might have to establish a budget so that you can afford or so that you can justify paying for interpreters or what other accommodations exist in your business if requested. But it's about keeping an open mind and being open. Most accommodations cost pennies on the dollar in relation to what a business might bring in. So it was that kind of pushback that I got from the business community. Like, oh, I lose money every time that kind of person walks through the door. That motivated me even more to launch SFDBA. Chelsea, do you want to speak to that? Any barriers in relation to ableism that you faced in your journey?
Yeah, I guess pretty generally, like a lot of my initial engagements with folks is educational. It's because there's been some barrier that I have noticed that is ableist. And there's also some kind of like intermingling, I guess, because ableism and racism are so inextricably linked. It's a lot to have to unpack at times when I'm not in spaces where I'm discussing my disability identity with people who also look like me. Because then there are like these layers, multiple layers of conversations that are happening at once. And I think that's kind of how I've landed on my audience, because I can't tackle everything at once. I just can't. And I have experienced the conversation when I'm talking with groups who look like me tends to like, those barriers tend to be broken down more quickly. We can have one conversation, and by the end of that conversation, someone has like an idea of what disability justice means. Versus if I'm having a conversation with someone who doesn't look like me, I feel like the conversation tends to revolve around business need.
Ron?
Repeat the question for me.
What types of resources have been, that's the wrong question. obstacles or barriers as it relates to your business being formed that you face that might be related to your disability specifically?
I had the question, but
No,
I tuned out of like trying to prep my response to
And I-
actually listen, so that's why.
I jumped to the next question.
No problem. Anyways, obstacles and barriers. I think one of the main obstacles in my experience at least has been like, especially since COVID, there's been like this real incubator space of like small business, right? The city and nonprofits and a bunch of different things have stepped up to say like, how do we help small business? And they've chosen their lane. Some of them say like people of color, other people say women, other people say like whatever, they pick these groups. But I don't hear the disabled community come up as though in those priority groups. And I think like in general, the tone that I kind of pick up when I'm in a space and I'm advocating for people with disabilities or like advocating for their ability to do things, there's some assumption of like, oh, well, people with disabilities are on government assistance and they're
Right.
going to get government assistance until the day they die. And it's not, how can we help them live sustainable lives where they can do things that they want to do, right? So I think that's one of the biggest barriers, that people either make the assumption that I can't do a certain level of things or that I'm making up what level of things I can do. So it's like, either your disability doesn't affect you that much and you can do all of this, or like your disability affects you too much and you can do none of this. And there's no like in between balance of like, he can need some accommodations and also be a great asset to something, right? And then how do we invest in that? I don't think a lot of people are invested in supporting that lane of the small business owners. So that's one of the biggest obstacles. And then I know the second part of the question was like, what keeps you motivated? I think like been counted out since I was born.
Hmm.
I remember my dad telling me like as a kid, and I lost both of my parents in 2021. So their advice rings stronger now than it ever has. Told me like as a small kid, he's like, not only are you Black, but like you got a disability. So as I would tell your brother to work 2 times harder, you gotta work 3 times harder because they're gonna count you out even more. And I think from that, like I've never given up on anything. The doctors told my dad like I wouldn't walk and I'd probably be bound to a wheelchair. So, you know, I just never giving up wasn't even like when I started doing anything, that was never an option. So me and my cousin were talking about this on my way here. Like, it doesn't matter if I come through the front door, the side door, the back door. If I said I was going somewhere, I'm coming. So that's my mentality.
Wow, that's powerful, Rum, and it reminds me of why I specifically kept disability in the title of the SFDBA. I find a lot of the times it's, you know, I'm not faulting anybody for their creativity if they want to change the name of it, but there's something that makes people uncomfortable about the term disability. And I very specifically wanted to keep it in our title to make sure that people understood that we were representing and that people with disabilities are very capable. Just because there's a in disability, the community aligns itself with that terminology very closely. So there's no shame, there's no fear in identifying with being having a disability rather. Did you want to add?
Yeah, I just, like for me, the obstacles were earlier in my life. I went all the way through school with no accommodations at all because the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, passed in 1990 when I was 25. And so I went all the way through undergraduate, high school with no accommodations at all. Because back then I think parents were like, well, if they can kind of function in school, just leave them there. Don't put them in what was called special ed, back in the day, because it was very stigmatized. And, with the 2 factors, okay, race and disability, poverty and disability, because that's another bad combination because, like when I 2 of my proudest accomplishments are getting a bachelor's degree and getting a master's degree. And to many people, it's like, whoop-de-doo, you went to college. Lots of people go to college. It's like, yeah, lots of people go to college, but not under these circumstances, you know? And I think now, you know, there's like a lot more support. Like there are, you know, support programs at the like UC, which is where I went to 2 UC campuses for first generation students, low income students, whatever. Back in the day, you were just like on your own. And also because you can't tell by looking at me, you know, that I'm not middle class or that I'm disabled, people would just assume, oh, she's from the same background as we are, you know, because like back in the day, especially in the 80s, people that went to like UC San Diego and UC Santa Cruz were from kind of upper class backgrounds with second houses in France, you know, and I was like, am I going to be homeless? You know, like that's a really weird space to be in when people look at you and they assume that you've got all these advantages and in reality you don't, you know, and so, yeah. You know, I'm very good about not making judgments about other people because my experiences, yeah. So
Thank you, Bali.
Yeah.
In the spirit of time here, I want to make sure that we address one of the biggest requests was to discuss some of the resources that our diverse panel has tapped into. Rome, I'll start with you because I know that you've done the Renaissance Entrepreneurship Program and Black Wall Street. Are there other resources that you've tapped into as an entrepreneur with a disability that have helped you on your journey?
Yeah, all of them that I can find. There's not enough. But SF Black Wall Street is a nonprofit, and they had a cohort of young adults, TAYU, which are 18 to 24, young adult small business owners or people with ambitions to start a small business, which was attached to a grant through the Dream Keepers Initiative in San Francisco. So I was able to take advantage of that, complete their program. I'm currently in a program in Oakland. I can't think of the name of it. My cousin's here, maybe she knows the name of it. But I'm currently in a program in Oakland. I can't remember the name right now. It's escaping me. Renaissance Center. I was able to tap into resources there. I'm still in touch with them. Actually, they're helping me with my website. But they had another program that came with a small grant. And then the state of California, the Office of Small Business in California, which I think I tapped in through the Office of Small Business in San Francisco. I'm attached to their newsletter, and as like different opportunities come out, follow up with them. So I did something with like state of California. I can't think of the name of that either. I mean, I probably could pull it up on my email or whatever, but just looking for them all the time, like just staying in touch with like the newsletters for like any counties that I work in, right? If they have like an Office of Small Business, different things of that nature, following through on grants, places like Hello Alice, like just making sure I'm watching or whatever nonprofits or anything put out newsletters for small business support. So links like that. Sometimes I just Google like randomly if I got free time, Google grants for small businesses. Thrive Point.
That's in Oakland.
Yeah, the Oakland program is so that's been cool too. Completing their program now.
Like Rome said, the Office of Small Business here in San Francisco is a resource. You can always reach out to San Francisco Disability Business Alliance. We do a lot of referrals. We connect folks with mentors, networking opportunities, our future entrepreneur training, Department of Occupational Rehab, the SBA, the SBDC, and SCORE are all government agencies that offer resources as well. Chelsea, do you have any response to that question relating to resources for individuals with disabilities to access and starting a small business?
A non-answer answer. Not really. This is an area that I haven't really explored much, as I've been but working more on like what actually do I like as a business owner before I go ask people for money to fund it. But that is one of my goals for this next 3 months with my executive assistant, is to actually identify what kind of opportunities I do want to try to pursue, but I want to be more in the grant space for sure.
Excellent. Thank you. Bali?
So the actual filing for the business, because it's sole proprietorship, it was super basic. I got everything I needed from the Office of Small Business website, and I just registered the business. The challenge for me was acquiring the technical skills to teach online, because I had always been an in-person teacher. And so that was kind of where I had some anxieties, but there were a lot of online training videos, and some professional organizations that I belonged to also had free conferences. And so that was, if there's anybody that needs those resources, I'm happy to share them. They're field specific. And then the pandemic, I'm so sorry that it had such a terrible effect on so many small businesses. But for me, it ended up helping me, because everybody was stuck at home alone. So I suddenly had this client base domestically and internationally, and everybody, the whole academic world was online together learning this new technology, so that ended up, I feel sorry for what it did to other people, but it actually helped me, start a business at that time.
I'm curious, this is off script a little bit. I recently met an entrepreneur, and he said the only thing that gets him out of bed in the morning is rage, and just being excited about being creative and making an impact in the world. And I thought that was pretty amazing, because sometimes, I'm not going to lie, being an entrepreneur is daunting. We run short on money. We're trying to figure out where our next deal is going to come from. I met somebody through the DePaul University Entrepreneurship Center, and he said, you have to be a little bit crazy to be an entrepreneur. There is a certain level of risk involved in being an entrepreneur. And I guess to this panel, I'm curious, what inspires you to get up every day and do what you're doing? I mean, I think it's evident to everyone here that we're all very excited about the work that we do, but what is it in particular that makes you just really excited about being an entrepreneur and having your own business? Bali?
Well, I mean, my passions are, other languages and cultures, international relations, spirituality, and social justice. And so, I wanted to be a teacher since I was in my early 20s. And that was a core part of my identity for all the years I worked in the regular workforce. So, work is not just about money. I want to feel like I'm making a difference, or that some of the hardships that I've overcome, if I can help somebody else who's going through that problem now, or, if I can be understanding with my client who has a disability, or I can do some pro bono work for somebody who needs help but can't afford my fee. I mean, it's just, a life of service. I think for me, that's what makes life meaningful. So.
Wow, you brought up another great point too, that spirituality, it's really important as an entrepreneur to be taking care of yourself mentally, physically, making sure that you're eating right and staying hydrated. Because a lot of the time you're doing stuff, you can attest to this, Chelsea, you're doing stuff on your own, and sometimes it feels isolating, but there is a network. And I think it brings up another great point, that you have to have lifelines to reach out to. You have to have somebody that you can call and say, oh, what do I do now? Chelsea, do you want to speak to that? Just maybe it's a twofold question, like your health and managing your health, but also making sure that you have a network to lean into.
One of the I think most beneficial parts of exploring my disability identity, which for me started in college, was getting connected with disability communities. And Peter with SFDBA was one of those. A couple of weeks ago, we had a mentor chat, because I was trying to make some decisions and wasn't sure what to do, and wanted to chat with someone who would be able to speak to the disability lens of things that I was trying to think through. And so I definitely have found that the community aspect and education through community has been a big differentiator. And two of the books, or I guess there are a couple of books that I'm not sure what we're sending afterwards that I could share separately, but Black Disability Politics by Dr. Sammy Schalk, which is an open access book. She made available for everyone to access it online for free. Has been an unlock for me in really putting Blackness and disability in the same space in a conversational book. And then also Care Work by Leah Lakshmi Pyapshana Samarasena, that really taught me more about giving myself credit for the care that I provide to myself, because that is work that I'm doing. And I think something kind of full circle for me, and I mentioned to some folks on the panel that my grandmother was with me this weekend. And one of my goals, and I haven't seen my grandmother in quite a long time, and one of my goals in connecting with her and her getting to spend time with me here was her just like feeling more empowered to provide herself the access supports she needs as she's navigating getting older. And it was really rewarding for me to have not expressed that to her as what I wanted out of her visit, but for her to have just told me that before I dropped her off at the airport this morning. And she took the Care Work book with her, and she's excited about learning how to love herself as a disabled person. And that is part of what the positive of what gets me out of bed and my entrepreneurship journey, because there's a lot of negative things that I want to combat, but
Go back to bed.
yeah, but the opportunity to see what can grow and change as a result of being more acquainted with disability is like where the power is.
That's profound. Rome, did you want to chime in on that one? And then I want to save enough time for some questions. We're at about 8 minutes left here, so I want to leave a few minutes for questions.
For me, like, I had never met anybody with cerebral palsy till I was like 19. And you know, like, and if I did, which I don't recall, but if I did, they were like in more severe situations than me, and it was hard to like really see a comparison. But even like in those spaces, I noticed like the impact my existence had on them.
Mm.
And I'm actually mistaken. I met one boy, I think I was 17, 16, like late in high school. He was in elementary school. Funny enough, he went to the same elementary school that I went to when I was still in contact with people, and they were able to get in contact with me to meet this young man, right? And then he ended up having some of the same therapists as me and kind of like followed my path. And so I think like for me to have more information, for me to learn new things, for me to do new things, partially because the way I was raised and as much as my family give back to the communities that they identified with, and partially like my own existence, I just feel like as you have information and as you gain information, that you have a responsibility, right, to the greater society to kind of like pay that forward.
That's powerful.
And give something back. So that's what gets me up, pushes through the journeys of like the ups and downs and the ebbs and flows. And then honestly, I mean, you take the good with the bad. Like, I think to have an idealistic view of living an all good life with no bad would be unrealistic, right? So like, I can't expect some extreme high without some extreme low.
Mm.
And so take those moments as I can, man. Push through them. It makes the victories that much sweeter, doesn't it?
Thank you. Bali, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that I read something that said something like 1 out of 4 Americans are going to have a disability at some point in their life. And in my circle of friends, and none of these people are people that I met through disability organizations, I know people who've got cancer, diabetes, eating disorders, depression, trauma-induced stress disorders, just, and this is just how it has turned out, like in my life. And several friends my age are on permanent Social Security disability. I have a very good friend who's a doctor, and she has such severe migraines that she had to stop being a doctor. And that was her great passion in life, like teaching was for me. And that's a very painful experience to go through. And so I think like one of the reasons I like talking to people that have disabilities is for people where it is still possible. I'm like, something similar happened to me, but not as severe as her. And this is a way that I can still do my old job, in a way. And maybe you can do this too, if you know how to do something that somebody else would pay you to teach them online, because it's just, it's a traumatic experience, or it can be, and it's good to just kind of let somebody who's going through a hard time know I went through that and I survived that, and I found a way to still have a meaningful life with a, as good a quality of life as I can have. And I can help you too,
Wow. Thank you so much. All of our panelists here today have been great, super inspired. The work that we're doing. Thank you all for participating. We wanted to open it up to our participants out there, or here. We have a few participants here at the SF Chamber as well. Are there any questions that anybody has? We'd be happy to answer a few questions here. We have about 4 minutes left. I wanted to thank the Chamber again while you guys are typing in the chat box there, and our sponsor at CIBC for making this possible for us. They're new here in San Francisco, so if any of you need small business loans, CIBC is new here to San Francisco, and yeah, I'd be happy to connect you with them. Any questions coming in yet? No questions yet. Come on, we need one question.
What's the DEI equation?
So a question here from a participant here asked, what is the DEI equation that I referred to earlier? Many organizations, universities even, or talk about diversity and equity and inclusion, and it frequently relates to people from diverse backgrounds, and it educates people within their organization of how to treat individuals fairly and equitably as it relates to civil rights, and making sure that we're being sensitive and aware and attuned and educated to people's diverse backgrounds. And when I moved here to San Francisco, a lot of the time disability was excluded from that equation. And my philosophy is that there is no diversity and equity and inclusion without including the disability community as well. So,
And Peter, if I can
Yeah.
add in, the three groups that I think are often excluded are people with disabilities, older workers, because older workers have their own issues trying to get employment. Like if you're a high-tech person and you lose your job when you're 55, good luck getting another job, for real. And then the third group is just poverty, which intersects with other factors, but anybody can fall into poverty, at any point in their life.
any questions out there? We have 1 minute left. I want at least one question here. These folks took their time to be here today. I'd appreciate some interaction here.
Is what Anna Carabez is asking, is there a way to volunteer?
So one of our participants asked if there's a way to volunteer. I'll be following up with a survey and some of the resources that we've discussed and links to all of our panelists. And you can reach out. I mean, if you guys want to answer, are there opportunities? There are certainly opportunities to volunteer at SFDDA. We have several interns working with us right now. Chelsea, any opportunities for volunteers with your organization?
Nothing formal right now as I'm getting my assistant onboarded. But I'm hoping to have an internship next summer, actually.
And again, I'll include everybody's contact information in there if you want to reach out to them individually, as well as resources and a quick survey. Are there any other questions that came in?
Some, or else asked, what do you do if you were disabled?
So somebody asked, what do you do if folks don't believe that you're disabled? Anybody want to field that question?
I was born with mine, so I can't really, I don't know.
You can get disability certification, like if you need accommodations in a school environment. There's a process to do that, and you just get a medical, evaluation saying these are your functional limitations, these are accommodations that you need. And then your professor gets that if you need it in a school context. And there was a woman on that call that we were on last night.
Department
Yeah,
of Rehab also has a certification for state jobs
City jobs.
and city jobs that you can submit your disability verification paperwork to
There's
them.
actually city jobs like set aside for people with disabilities.
That's a great question.
But I think my verifications have always come through my doctor too, like even the Department of Rehab, that's some type of like physician verification.
And I think your actions, I think, to proving your disability to someone might look different depending on what your disabilities are and like what your medical access has been to date. That I had no kind of anything going through school, so that wasn't an option for me. And so more general guidance that I would say is like, is this someone that like, is there another someone to go to other than this person? Because the level of proof can look very different depending on what the request is and like what the organization is that is fulfilling it.
Can you just pass it to me?
Yeah.
We have one more question here and we're over time, but we'll wrap up. What organizations and programs would you recommend joining in San Francisco for those interested in learning more about advocating for those who identify with a disability? It's a great question. SFDBA.
I'm actually looking for those myself as well, so. I think like my answer to that would be go to organizations that you like the work of, like advocate for them to create a lane to make things more accessible to people with disabilities. I think, like I said, I'm looking for more of that myself.
That's a great point. Like, and maybe if you see the absence of disability in a particular organization and you see a specific need, you could address it that way too. Say, is there a way that I can get involved with your organization to address this particular vacancy or void, as it were? Thank you all for participating today, and we'll be in touch with a follow-up email. Thank you to our amazing ASL interpreter, Beth Wagmeister. If you want to check out her amazing work that she's doing, not only is she a great interpreter, but she's doing her own amazing work around accessibility. I'll include her website in my follow-up email to you all. And yeah, please get involved locally. And thanks for celebrating Small Business Week with us here. And yeah, we look forward to our next program. For now, signing off. Thank you so much.